There are a lot of valid criticisms you can throw at Gordon Ramsay. He's helped normalize being abusive to restaurant staff across the entire industry. When the world shut down a few years ago, he fired over 500 employees. And by far the worst, he was in Smurfs: The Lost Village.
Let me be frank, she's a rubbish baker.
But the one thing you can't say about Gordon Ramsay is that the man doesn't understand how to make good TV. Kitchen Nightmares is probably the most entertaining TV show I've ever seen. I didn't say it was the best, I said it was the most entertaining. We'll talk more about that later. Gordon Ramsay's public image in general absolutely fascinates me. The guy owns over 50 restaurants, has tons of Michelin stars, and also probably has one of the most successful careers in the history of entertainment. But he achieved all of that through becoming famous for swearing, insulting people to their faces, and getting angry really quickly over nothing. I don't really understand how he's done this. This is usually stuff that both regular people and advertisers hate. If someone else was as famous as Gordon Ramsay, and it came out that they had been doing this, they would be out of a career. I remember in 2008, Christian Bale had a legendary meltdown on the set of some Terminator movie no one cares about. Director's cut? This movie had a director? The film cinematographer didn't realize they were filming or something and just walked right through the set, and Christian Bale completely humiliated him. Christian Bale had to apologize several times, and there were entire parody videos making fun of how ridiculous the situation was. He did not get away with it, is what I'm saying. To this day, people still reference Christian Bale's meltdown. It has a bigger cultural footprint than the movie itself. It's probably the second biggest thing out of Terminator Salvation, after that arcade game that seems to be everywhere. But for some reason, when Gordon does this, people love it. He has an entire presence on TikTok where all he does is insult food now. And I don't want to sound like I'm preaching to you. I'm guilty of this too. I enjoy watching Kitchen Nightmares. For a while, anytime I ate lunch, I would just put an episode on, even though I'm pretty sure I did permanent damage to my soul doing it. Out of all of Gordon's shows, the US version of Kitchen Nightmares is the one that I find myself constantly coming back to, because it kind of summarizes Gordon Ramsay as a whole. He's very much painted as a guy who yells at people and tears them down, so he can build them back up again and help them achieve their best. And that's interesting, isn't it? Because that's not the premise of Kitchen Nightmares. He goes in looking to fix issues around the food, and he comes out fixing people. While everything about Kitchen Nightmares is designed to look like a show about cooking, it isn't a cooking show. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. Kitchen Nightmares does take a lot from cooking shows, but most of it's in the presentation. The actual meat of the show doesn't really try to teach the viewer anything about food. It actually skips past the bits where the chefs learn to cook, except of course if they're going to one of Gordon's restaurants, then there's loads of time for that. Kitchen Nightmares is also an absurdly expensive show to make, at least in the context of cooking. If you're unfamiliar with how an episode of Kitchen Nightmares works, here's the structure. Each episode opens with the camera crew interviewing the owners of the restaurant, and it's obvious the restaurant's not doing well, so then Gordon shows up to try to fix it. He always enters first by ordering food as a customer, so he can test and see what's good and what isn't. And no chef discriminates between good and bad food as clearly as Gordon Ramsay does.
Chimichanga? Chimichanga in the bin. What a shame.
In fact, the only chef who discriminates more than Gordon Ramsay is Paula Deen. There's also usually a segment where Gordon goes into the kitchen and sees a service in action, how the staff communicate, why the food does or doesn't make it out to the dining room. Then there's a bit after that where Gordon goes into the restaurant's walk-in fridge, and then he always touches the food that's gone off with his bare hands. Ew! Gordon Ramsay's team then comes in, completely changes the menu and retrains the chefs, and most of the time they also remodel the entire restaurant. Each episode normally ends with one big launch night to really put this new restaurant on the map, and then Gordon slinks out into the night, never to talk to them again. Except when he does, sometimes. According to this Delish article I found, at one point Gordon Ramsay said the budget of a single episode of Kitchen Nightmares was $1.5 million. But one of the fundamental things about cooking shows is that they're really cheap to make. That's why anyone can make one and put it on TikTok or YouTube. It's also kind of why they exist in the first place. TV networks need loads of programming so that they can beam entertainment to you constantly. There's only so many times you can schedule How I Met Your Mother before someone will finally get sick of it. So sometimes you need to fill a half an hour slot, and you don't have a lot of money left over to do it. So what do? You build a set, maybe a studio audience, volunteers are cheap, and you put together a kitchen. But that's not enough, is it? What's the show? Someone just cooking? No one's gonna watch that. This isn't Jian Dilman. No, what you need is a personality. In 1963, a US cooking show came out called The French Chef. It wasn't the first cooking show, but it was definitely one of the first majorly influential ones. It ran for over 200 episodes, and the whole thing was hosted by Julia Child, a classically trained chef who just a couple of years prior in 1961 had helped contribute to a cookbook. That book was titled Mastering the Art of French Cooking. And you know, unless you're really interested in cooking, like buying old issues of culinary magazines, you probably have no idea what this book is. Looking at it today, most of it's not useful anymore. Who wouldn't want to try mouth-watering asbestos? But the book was a huge success at the time. A lot of people attribute the fact that Julia Child even got a TV show in the first place entirely to the success of this book. The reason her show, The French Chef, even works is because of her position as an authority on French cooking in the first place. If you track cooking shows from their origin till today, the one constant is always the expert. Whether it's Anthony Bourdain or Martha Stewart, people like knowing that the person talking to them knows more about the food than they do. And Kitchen Nightmares can look you in the face and tell you it's not a cooking show, but it still needs you to believe this in order for the whole show to work. Gordon has to be an expert. Not to mention, food is a really subjective thing. Television only gives us 2 of the 5 senses. We can't touch, smell, or taste the food. That's a pretty big part of judging food, right? So we need someone with an established palate to tell us whether the food is good or not, because we can't judge it. And by doing that, we need to inherently trust someone and their opinion. And it's through this that the show manages to get away with painting Gordon as constantly in the right, sometimes when he clearly isn't. In the latest season, the 2023 one, Gordon goes to a restaurant called Diwan and orders the gobi Manchurian. And when it arrives, he complains that it's an Indian restaurant, but they served him a fusion Indo-Chinese dish. But what? That's what it is. It was literally invented in Chinese restaurants in India. I've eaten this dozens of times, it's great. Like most of the Indian restaurants I've been to have it on the menu. And this is when I realized every scene in Kitchen Nightmares operates off the assumption that Gordon is always correct. He can't ever be wrong. There's one really famous clip from Kitchen Nightmares where Gordon gets served grilled romaine lettuce. It's one of the most viewed videos on the Kitchen Nightmares YouTube channel. It's got 28 million views. Essentially, the whole clip is Gordon sees grilled lettuce on a menu, orders it, and then humiliates the chef for even coming up with the idea, like calling a toast in the restaurant just to talk about how stupid it is, and how he's never heard of a dish like this. But like, this is a thing. It takes 2 seconds to Google grilled lettuce and like a billion recipes pop up. It's pretty common in Asian food. Has Gordon ever eaten like a lettuce wrap or something? Don't just take it from me though. Take it from Gordon himself. In 2005, Gordon Ramsay wrote a recipe on roasted lettuce. This episode aired 7 years later. So what was the point of this scene? Just to make fun of the chef? What a dickhead. Either way, now that we know the scene is obviously wrong, let's look at how the show constructs that scene to make it look like Gordon's in the right. And check out how many times it cuts to someone else's reaction here. It cuts to the waitress once, reacting to the lettuce, and then it cuts to her again, saying something about it, but this time in the future. And then when Gordon does this reverse toast, I guess, it cuts twice to 2 other angles of people reacting. Then this table, then that table, and then another shot from behind Gordon. Then these random close-ups of people laughing, and I don't have any proof of this, but it looks like these shots were recorded at some other time. Like they don't look like they're reacting to the lettuce. By my count, that's 9 reaction shots for this stupid lettuce. It's a numbers game. If they constantly show you people reacting to something in a specific way, it's natural that you're gonna go along with it. It's sort of like when you hear audiences laughing in a sitcom, they're giving you your cue. And I don't mean the ball either. The reason they can do this is because Kitchen Nightmares follows a very strict formula. It has the exact same plot in every episode. Gordon goes into a failing restaurant, he says everything's bad, he fights with the people there, and then it ends. And it's not difficult to do this. By going into restaurants that are already about to close, there's a lot of drama just waiting to be filmed. It's gotta be stressful, intense every day, and that's on top of the stress of working in a restaurant already to begin with. It's one of the most stressful jobs ever. Be nice to service industry workers, man. But then you'll have someone like Gordon come in, and the producers will try to fit that existing drama into the more artificial structure of the TV show. A structure that's designed to create even more drama. Like, does Gordon really need to test the food as a customer first? Wouldn't it make more sense to go into the kitchen and see how it's made instead, and then eat it? The only reason he would eat the food first is to make the show more interesting. And you know, fair enough, because it does work. Every episode is like one of those hydraulic press videos. You can only put so much tension on something before... Why didn't I use a pressure cooker metaphor? Whenever this comes up, people will always say the same thing. Gordon is playing up a character. He's doing it to make a more interesting show. And they compare it to the UK version of Kitchen Nightmares, which came out a couple of years before. Like, look, he's normal here. He looks calm. The US one, therefore, is clearly a character. And you know, maybe there is some truth to that, but it kinda misses the bigger picture. If you go back to the 90s, Gordon Ramsay's story looks completely different. In 1993, Gordon Ramsay had just opened a restaurant called Aubergine as the head chef. But the restaurant itself belonged to a group of other people. Aubergine was hugely popular when Gordon was the head chef, with entire articles being written about how successful he was. In 1996, Gordon had enough clout as a chef that he could publish his own cookbook, Gordon Ramsay's Passion for Flavor. By 1997, Gordon Ramsay was having guests like Robert De Niro show up, and turning away others like Madonna. And they were famous in the 90s. The next year, in 1998, Gordon organized a walkout at Aubergine and left to start his own London restaurant that same year, Restaurant Gordon Ramsay. And like, mad respect, that's definitely a crazy, risky move. But I will say, even this early, Gordon is being referred to as a celebrity chef in the newspaper. He has prestige. People are looking to him for their idea of what a chef is. And that takes us to one of the first appearances Gordon Ramsay ever made on television, a British documentary from 1998 called Britain's Most Unbearable Bosses, which apparently 3 million people saw when it was originally broadcast out. It was a one-off special that looked at all of these horrible bosses when they didn't know they were being filmed, and it featured a huge segment on Gordon, big enough to have an article written about it in the newspaper. What I'm trying to say with this is that even from his very start in television, Gordon Ramsay's public image has always been associated with anger and abusing his employees. You can't divorce him from it or claim he's playing a character. That's what he is to most people. He definitely plays it up for the camera, and just to be clear, I have no idea what he's like today in his personal life or when the cameras aren't rolling. But this is coming from a real place, isn't it? It was enough for journalists to try to expose him on TV. But what makes this more complicated is the 1999 TV show that brought way more attention to Gordon. And this is the one that has the most similarities with the US Kitchen Nightmares, another documentary called Boiling Point, and this time it was a series of 5 episodes. Boiling Point follows Gordon Ramsay during that point in his life where he had left Aubergine, and it covers the next 8 months as he starts up his own restaurant and tries to get some Michelin stars under his belt. And like, it's good TV, man. Unlike Kitchen Nightmares, Boiling Point is actually very critical of Gordon. It doesn't really try to take one side. It'll show you the scenes of Gordon being quite charismatic, but it won't be afraid to juxtapose that alongside the scenes of him freaking out on his employees. Boiling Point trusts the viewer enough to come to their own conclusions on whether or not what Gordon's doing is justified. And it isn't. People mention all the time how often the US version of Kitchen Nightmares cuts, and how it has all of these crazy sound effects put under it. I always see this attributed to like American attention spans or something. I don't know about that, but I have noticed something about it that's related to Boiling Point. Anytime Gordon freaks out in Boiling Point, the show isn't as hurried to cut to the next scene or a different shot. So as soon as he's done freaking out, the camera will just stay there for a while watching him. And as he switches from really laying into one of his staff and then going back into work mode, it really forces the viewer to consider how Gordon's actions affect those around him. In the US shows, they cut so quickly away that you never have to consider the impact of what Gordon's done. As soon as he freaks out, it just cuts immediately, and that's the end of it. And it uses all of those cartoony sound effects to rob the scene of its more emotional energy. Imagine how bad some of this stuff would look without those sound effects.
A leg of lamb, blood. This is criminal. You have cross-contaminated.
How are you meant to take this seriously? The sound design is like something out of Johnny Test. No viewer watching the US version of Kitchen Nightmares has to actually deal with and process the emotions that the people around Gordon are feeling. But in Boiling Point, by hanging on shots like these, it makes you understand that his actions do affect others. They don't exist in a vacuum. It shows he's wrong. For all of his talk about how it's tough love and forces people to grow a backbone, it's not true. You can see it physically harming people. And just to be real, if you watched only Boiling Point and you had no other idea of who Gordon Ramsay is, you would think he's a psychopath.
You wanna go home and cry to mummy again? No. Like a big f***ing wuss? No, Gordon.
He comes across like he's Michael Jordan in The Last Dance, and I'm barely exaggerating. He'll do anything possible to get the slightest win, sometimes for no reason. In one episode, Gordon gets paid to promote a certain type of apple. He has to make a recipe using it in front of some journalists, but he just switches out the apple for another similar one, and then uses a tiny amount of a puree of the original apple. Because he knows none of the critics will be able to tell. Even the person who's paying him to do this can't tell. But like, why? Why would you do that? It feels like you're just causing more problems for yourself. And you know the best part of this? It's the fact he's right. It's one of the most entertaining things I've ever seen. Even though he's completely ripping these people off who are paying him to their face, they still have no idea. They come across like posh, stuck-up rich people, especially next to Gordon. This is what makes Gordon Ramsay such an interesting person. He knows what he's talking about sometimes, so you can't completely dismiss everything he says. He's arrogant in a way where he can back up most of what he's talking about. On some level, it is kind of refreshing to hear Gordon talk shit on people like this. It's because when he does this, he's punching up. He comes across like an underdog. Gordon's public image exists in that world of fine dining and culinary excellence, but he manages to ride that line in such a way that he can also present himself as an outsider. And I really think a lot of this is down to how much he swears. Swearing's a really powerful tool, because when you curse, it immediately brings up all of these emotions to the surface. When someone swears, you know they're being genuine, and sometimes that might be genuine hatred, but you know they mean it. And when Gordon Ramsay swears, it feels like he's making that world of fine dining suddenly feel accessible to us. When describing a bad plate of food, for example, he could criticize the garnish, the plating, how the food's been cooked, and I might not understand all of that. But you know what I definitely understand? When the food is shit. There are some real terrible owners on Kitchen Nightmares, and it feels so good seeing someone put them back in their place. Like holy shit, imagine paying money in a restaurant for microwave food. At least use the air fryer. It taps into a feeling I think a lot of us have. Whenever we've been at work and we've been exploited, Gordon gets to say the things that we never could. I think on some level it works in Boiling Point because Gordon is still a working class guy. When he robs that apple guy, it feels great. No matter what I do with my life, I will never be in a position to pay a chef £5,000 to promote an apple for me. So it's satisfying to see Gordon point out that it's bullshit. He's taking promo photos with the wrong apple here. It's easy to forget now, but the internet really changed the way people think about food. So many great food writers like J. Kenji Lopez-Alt have made the process of cooking way more transparent today. I remember for the longest time, food was one of the easiest things to be like stuck up and snobbish about, and that's because food is a political thing. Have you ever noticed how it's the most expensive food that's considered the best? They put gold leaf on everything at those places, and gold leaf doesn't taste of anything. The concept of fine dining comes from royal courts and aristocracy. From the very start, fine dining has always been exclusionary. The kind of person who can justify spending £200 on dinner is a very specific type of person. And it's not you or me, which is what made Gordon's on-screen presence so appealing here. Here's a guy who's well respected by the people who make up the food system, and he's telling you it's nonsense. But it's also important to note that Boiling Point came out in 1999. The very first episode of the US versions of Kitchen Nightmares came out in 2007. That's 8 years after Boiling Point. A lot can change in 8 years. That's the same amount of time between Hit Me Baby One More Time Britney and Blackout era Britney. There's like 5 different evolutions in sound between those. One of the things I've always found interesting about Britney's sound is how much it evolves between albums, especially because at the time, Britney's reputation in the media was severely negative, and they'd use it to downplay any of her contributions to pop music as a whole, which is strange because she's had more staying power than any of her contemporaries, whether it's Mariah Carey, Avril Lavigne, or Gwen Stefani. I still go back to Britney's albums, but none of theirs, and... Wait, what was this video about? Because Gordon Ramsay's company is... a company, it has to publicly file taxes. We can actually check how much money it's making. And apparently in 2007, the same year the US version of Kitchen Nightmares started, the Gordon Ramsay holding company made £1.3 million in profit. I also found this Times Online article from 2007 where they estimate Gordon Ramsay's fortune, their words not mine, as £67 million. Yeah, I know it's shares in a company, but it's still a lot. I don't own millions of pounds in shares. And so what? Gordon Ramsay's rich. He's one of the richest chefs in the world, even back in 2007. Big deal. But isn't it at least a little surprising that his whole thing in Kitchen Nightmares is being relatable and that sort of thing? But he was a multi-millionaire the whole time the show was being made? This is the thing about Gordon Ramsay's public image. It's not just complex, it's contradictory. He claims to be in it solely to help these restaurants, but we know that can't be true because we're watching a TV show about it. The fact that this show exists means it's alive. Every episode is this constant push and pull between two states. On one end, you have the idea Gordon's making a show for profit and raising the drama on purpose. And on the other side, you have the idea that Gordon's trying to help the restaurant owners. It can't ever go too far towards each side because then there's no show. Kitchen Nightmares has to exist in this limbo state. This becomes really obvious if you watch another show Gordon Ramsay made, Gordon Ramsay's 24 Hours to Hell and Back. It's essentially just Kitchen Nightmares, but the whole gimmick is they're doing the entire events of an episode of Kitchen Nightmares in just 24 hours. And also, he has this giant truck called the Hell on Wheels for some reason. It's about the size of the average American SUV. Normally, they would film an episode of Kitchen Nightmares for like a week. But because this is only 24 hours, they don't have as much time to get the perfect footage they want. So Gordon really doesn't come across like a good guy in it. Now I just want to ask you, the core idea of 24 Hours to Hell and Back is about going into failing restaurants so that they can help them. How effective do you think that's going to be if you keep people up for 24 hours straight and then make them work a full restaurant shift after? This is just my opinion, and so is the rest of the video, but the whole show doesn't work because it's too transparent. Gordon doesn't give a shit. It's kind of the same feeling I get watching the intro to Kitchen Nightmares. What emotion am I meant to be feeling watching this? They made the letter I in the logo a knife. It looks like an assassination sequence from Danganronpa. Without a doubt, Gordon isn't just the main character, he's the hero of the story that Kitchen Nightmares is telling. And that means they'll do anything to frame him like a hero. Even though Gordon's the main appeal of the show, he's all over the intro sequence, they don't present it like a Gordon Ramsay show. He doesn't even host it. In the UK Kitchen Nightmares, the show was called Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares, and he would narrate and present it to you.
It's my second day in Wales, where I'm trying to help the owner save the famous Walnut Tree restaurant.
But in the US one, they dropped his name from the title entirely. For some reason, there's a completely different person who narrates the show now.
Forest Hills, an upper middle-class enclave in the heart of Queens, New York.
The only time Gordon ever directly talks to the viewer, it's with these weird little asides where he tells you what's going on in his mind. But he's not actually talking to you or me. He's always looking slightly off screen, and his dialogue is always framed like he's talking to someone else. And then usually after doing one of these, he always walks away from the camera, like he's been interrupted by having to talk to us. Where are you going, dude? Just to be clear, this is a choice. Whenever they shoot people who aren't Gordon, they look into the camera just fine. And there's loads of stuff like this. The show doesn't even start with Gordon. He enters like 5 minutes in, after the restaurant owners have already been introduced. It's a bit weird, isn't it? It's like Gordon is a guest on his own show. A show that he executive produces. The more I looked at this, the more I realized this is Gordon Ramsay's image. To the restaurant owners, the value of an episode of Kitchen Nightmares is they get access to Gordon and his expertise. But when you think about the way an episode of Kitchen Nightmares is presented to us, the viewer, it's like the value we're getting from the show is that we also get access to Gordon. like he's this exclusive entity. And this is everywhere across Gordon Ramsay's image. Gordon's always been really popular, but he's arguably the biggest he's ever been today. And I'm not just talking muscle-wise either. The average Kitchen Nightmares episode was pulling in 3 to 4 million viewers, and Hell's Kitchen at its peak had about 12 million an episode. But the Gordon Ramsay YouTube channel has over 20 million subscribers. As Boiling Point says several times, Gordon hates the term celebrity chef, but he will still make all of the public appearances that come with that.
I don't want to be labelled as a celebrity chef, and I don't have that status. I've never wanted that status.
And the food critic A.A. Gill has this to say about it.
Being a celebrity chef is the worst position for him. He's really bad at it because he can't control his temper.
Gordon's reputation for being quick to anger was great for reality TV, but it accidentally tapped into something else as well. The internet. Kitchen Nightmares was originally on the air between 2007 and 2014. Do you know what else was airing during that time? Yup, we're actually doing this. I swear I have a point. Gordon's personality perfectly taps into that brand of outrage culture that the internet just loves. I honestly don't think it's that much of a stretch to call him the angry cooking nerd. They're pretty similar. There's videos where he's passionate about stuff, and then there's other ones where he gets angry for no reason. I'm just saying, we might be a few years away from a skit where Gordon meets Bugs Bunny. Okay, that's quite enough of this bit. The way most people are watching Kitchen Nightmares these days isn't on TV, it's on YouTube. Specifically, the Kitchen Nightmares YouTube channel that just posts clips and episodes of the show. If you haven't seen the Kitchen Nightmares YouTube channel before, it's gonna blow your mind. Because whoever runs it must be like 70 years old or something. Because it's some of the worst out of touch, relatable meme humor I've ever seen. It's like stuff you would see on 9gag. Like, yeah, I'm really gonna click on this because you referenced Rufflecopter. It's like someone took those Sunny D depression tweets and put them in the hyperbolic time chamber from DBZ. This is genuinely one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. No matter how long I look at this, it still feels kind of icky. Because this is a very cynical decision. The Kitchen Nightmares YouTube channel is trying to cultivate a parasocial relationship with you because it knows there's only a finite amount of Kitchen Nightmares episodes out there, so it needs you to come back and click on the videos for another reason. Parasocial being a one-way relationship where you get invested with someone you don't know, by the way. It's fine, it's just a part of being online. A lot of people have them with YouTubers. I really like your hair today, by the way, please subscribe. But have you noticed how all of this isn't building a relationship with Gordon Ramsay, it's building a relationship with the social media manager of the Kitchen Nightmares YouTube channel. Guys, I got a promotion. The Last of Us finale broke me. I can't think of anything funny. I'm on my 3rd coffee and I feel nothing. How about you? I particularly like how they use no grammar on that last one to make it extra relatable to me, a Gen Z. All of this is to say, even the parasocial relationships on the official Kitchen Nightmares channel treat Gordon as this exclusive entity that you can only get a little bit of access to. That's how meticulously maintained his public image is. But let's look at how one of these Kitchen Nightmares episodes is made behind the scenes. Is what I would say if they had ever once actually talked about how they make it. They're incredibly secretive about how, so to speak, the sausage is made. And the reason they'll never say anything is because if they did, you'd realize just how insanely stacked the deck is in Gordon's favor. For example, one of the ways they get the footage they need is by putting up cameras everywhere. And that's not everywhere in an exaggerated sense, but genuinely everywhere in the restaurant. I first realized this because I was watching an episode where they pretty much admit it. This scene starts with Gordon trying to get a moment alone with the owner of the restaurant during a shift. And it's shot like this normal reverse shot scene, where it's just these two guys talking to each other. It feels really natural, like you're not even supposed to think about the camera being there. And then Gordon says this.
Guys, can you just give me 2 minutes, please? Please?
And then it pulls back, and the reveal is almost like a joke. Like you just realize these guys are trying to be honest with one another, and they've got these two giant dudes with these bazooka missile cameras staring right in their faces. This must be how most of the show is filmed. They gave it away. That's when I realized a lot of the manipulation in the show must be subconscious. Just putting a camera in someone's face is enough to make them do something that they don't want to do. It's a really powerful psychological thing. Humans naturally feel uncomfortable when they're being recorded. It's why acting is a professional job. And what do people do when they feel nervous? They go with the flow. This feeling of going along with something that you don't quite understand is literally the basis of some other entire shows, like Nathan For You or The Eric Andre Show. It's that powerful a feeling. But this scene isn't done yet, and check out how the rest of it's filmed. You might think logically the scene would end here, because why else would Gordon ask for a moment away from the cameras? But they keep filming from the outside, through a window, and there's a camera already planted in the room. And since this is a show, they're wearing microphones. Everything they're saying is still being recorded. So even though this owner thinks Ramsay's being genuinely honest with him, he's not, is he? In fact, I would argue the only purpose this scene has is to make Gordon look better, right? Like he did a selfless act. But it wasn't selfless, because it was in the show. What? But this idea of setting up cameras everywhere you want starts to make it feel a lot more like surveillance. They're obviously doing it so they can have as much footage as possible so that they can edit the show into whatever they want. That might be fine on a show like Big Brother, where contestants fully sign up for that experience. But it's another thing to go into someone's restaurant, a place that they own and work in daily, essentially a second home, and then set it up there. Even if they agree, they're not going to think of themselves as being constantly filmed. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I've seen this exact style of filmmaking before. Only, nobody was filming it. In the 18th century, a guy called Jeremy Bentham invented this design for a prison that he called the panopticon. Essentially, the prison would be designed in a circular shape, with a single tower in the middle and a single guard inside it. The tower is designed in such a way that from the inside of it, it's possible to look at every single corner of the prison. But from the outside as a prisoner, you can't see into it, so you have no idea when you're being watched. You have to perform every second of every day, as if someone could be judging your every action. And whether intentionally or not, this is exactly how Kitchen Nightmares is set up. Here's a question though. Who's the tower guard in this scenario? Can't be Gordon, it can't be the cameras or the producers either, so that only really leaves us. We're the people constantly watching them. Instead of one guard, there's infinite amounts of us, and since YouTube's always streaming, we're watching 24/7. This camera footage has no power by itself. It's only by the implication that we're going to watch it that it gets any power at all. They're afraid of us seeing them in a negative way, and they're right to feel that way. Almost 2 decades later, people are still watching the same episodes, me included. People have clipped together compilations of Boiling Point and stuck them on YouTube, and they get millions of views. But they're not highlights of Gordon's struggle, it's just the scenes of him getting angry and abusing people. Any of the filmmaking in Boiling Point that would show Gordon's failings, and maybe try ask you to come to your own conclusions, aren't here anymore. These clips have been surgically cut out and extracted from their context. Just look at the Kitchen Nightmares YouTube channel. What are the most viewed videos on it? Clips of Gordon insulting and fighting with people, compilations of hating food. And it works. Remember, I enjoy watching Kitchen Nightmares. I can't help it. It's sort of like junk food. On some level, I want that instant gratification. But no matter how bad I think it is, I still enjoy it. They found a formula to boil down entertainment to its most fundamental pieces. And even though we're all aware it's fake and staged and lying to us, I don't think any of us are immune to it. All you need to do to stop it is just turn it off. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you want to help me make more stuff like it, you can hit me up on Patreon. A massive thank you to the patrons for letting me make this video in the first place. And you can see all of their lovely names on screen right now. Starting with this video, I'm going to be putting up backer-only commentaries for all of the videos I've made so far. I'll be asking if anyone has any questions and then I'll respond to some of those on the commentary. As well as stuff like how I made the video and what are my thoughts on the research and that sort of thing. And if you're not sick of me yet, I've started a film podcast with a friend of mine, and it's called Labyrinth of Cinema. I think it's pretty good. I'm also on Twitter, and I seem to be like the only guy who's left on there. But if you just want to talk to me about the video or anything like that, just hit me up there. Thanks again for watching. See you next time.